Look at your phone. Somewhere on it, there is a number. It might be in a banking app, it might be in your email, a payslip, a direct deposit notification, a number that tells you what your time is worth. You worked, and at the end of the month, that number appeared. We call it a salary. But here is something most people have never stopped to think about. For almost all of human history, for thousands and thousands of years, that number did not exist. No salary, no wage, no payslip, nothing. People still worked, they built pyramids, they farmed land, they fought wars, they made things. So what did they get in return? The answer is stranger than you think. And it reveals something about the deal you make every single time you go to work, something hidden right inside the word salary itself. Let's start with a word, salary. You use it every day, but almost nobody knows where it comes from. It comes from the Latin word salarium, and salarium comes from sal, salt. The Roman soldiers who built and defended the greatest empire in history were not paid in gold. They were paid in or paid the equivalent of salt. Salt was that valuable. Before refrigeration, salt was the only way to preserve food. Without it, your meat rotted, your army starved, your city died. Salt was not just money. Salt was survival. But the Romans were not the first to figure out that workers needed to be paid in real things. In 1990, an Egyptian archaeologist named Zahi Hawass made a discovery near the pyramids of Giza that changed what we thought we knew about ancient Egypt. He found a workers' village, not a slave camp. A village with bakeries, with breweries, with medical records, with payroll records scratched onto pieces of broken pottery. The workers who built the Great Pyramid of Giza, one of the most extraordinary structures in human history, were paid employees. Their daily wage was 10 loaves of bread and a jug of beer, sometimes fish, sometimes vegetables. On festival days, cuts of beef. This is not an exaggeration. The payroll records survive. We can read them, name by name, ration by ration, day by day, the world's oldest payslips, written in clay 4,500 years ago. The first workers in recorded history were not paid in money. They were paid in what kept them alive. But Egypt was not the whole world. For most of human history, most workers never saw a coin, never held a wage, never signed a contract. In medieval Europe, roughly between the years 500 and 1000, 400 approximately 90% of the population were serfs. They were bound to the land of a lord. They could not leave without permission. They could not choose who to work for. Their arrangement was simple. They farmed the lord's land for 2 or 3 days every week. In return, they received protection, a place to live, safety from raiders, and the right to farm a small plot of land for themselves and keep whatever it produced. No coin ever changed hands. No number appeared at the end of the month. Their wage was security. Then, in 1347, everything changed. The Black Death arrived in Europe. By 1351, it had killed between 1/3 and 1/2 of the entire population of the continent. Entire villages were wiped out, fields sat empty, harvests rotted. Suddenly, there were not enough workers to go around. For the first time in history, ordinary people could say no. They could walk to the next village and demand better terms. Lords who needed their crops harvested had no choice but to offer something in return. The wage was not invented because powerful people wanted to be generous. It was invented because ordinary people became scarce enough to demand it. The English government understood the danger immediately. In 1351, they passed the Statute of Laborers, a law specifically designed to prevent workers from demanding higher wages. It tried to freeze pay at pre-plague levels. It failed. The age of wages had begun. But here's the part that gets left out of every history lesson. Before wages existed, workers owned something that wage workers do not. A craftsman in medieval Europe, a blacksmith, a weaver, a carpenter owned the product of his work until he sold it. The table he built was his. The horseshoe he forged was his. He set the price. He decided who to sell to. His skill was his wealth, and his wealth was a physical thing he could hold. A serf was not free, but the grain he grew on his own plot that was his. His family ate it. He sold the surplus. He could look at a field and say, I made this. The wage changed that. When you work for a salary, you do not own what you produce. The company owns it. You receive a number in exchange for surrendering any claim to what your labor created. The ancient Egyptian tomb builders understood this instinctively better than most modern workers do. Around 1170 BCE, under the reign of Pharaoh Ramesses III, the workers at Deir el-Medina, the village of craftsmen who built the royal tombs, stopped working. Their bread rations were 18 days late. They sat down, they refused to move, they sent a message to the authorities, "We have not received what we are owed." It was the first recorded labor strike in human history. They were not striking for money, they were striking for bread, for something real, for something they could hold. The first workers who ever went on strike did not want a bigger number. They wanted what the number was supposed to represent. Let's slow down. For most of human history, if you worked, you received something tangible: bread, beer, salt, land, a portion of what you helped create, something you could see, touch, and eat. It was direct, it was real. Then, slowly, over the last few hundred years, the world agreed to replace that with a number. Your salary is not payment. Not really. It is a promise. You work in January. You trust that your employer will keep their promise at the end of January. For 30 days, you have labored and received nothing but the understanding that the number will appear. Most of the time, it does, and we stop thinking about it. But in 2008, when companies across America collapsed and stopped making payroll, millions of workers discovered something the ancient Egyptians already knew. The moment the rations stop coming, nothing else matters. An economist at Oxford named Robert Allen spent decades tracking wages across history. In his research, he found something that should unsettle anyone who receives a monthly salary. For the first time in human history, modern workers have completely lost sight of what their labor actually produces. The pyramid builder could look up and see his work. The medieval blacksmith held his product in his hands. The modern salary worker produces something, a report, a service, a line of code, and receives in return a number that has no direct connection to the value they created. The salary did not free workers from the ancient system. It just made the ancient system invisible. So what did workers do before salaries were invented? They received what their work was actually worth, in things they could hold: bread, beer, salt, land, safety, the product of their own hands. The ancient Egyptian worker who sat down and refused to move after 18 days without rations was not being dramatic. He understood something that took the modern world centuries to forget. That work has a real value, and that real value should produce something real. The salary was supposed to be a step forward, and in many ways it was. It gave workers freedom, mobility, choice. The Black Death showed what happens when labor becomes scarce. Workers gain power. But somewhere along the way, the number replaced the thing the number represented. Your salary is a promise from someone who may or may not keep it. It lives in an app. It can be frozen, delayed, cut, or canceled with a single email. The pyramid builders went on strike for bread. Next time you check your bank balance at the end of the month waiting for the number to appear, you are doing exactly what they did, hoping the rations come in time.